Welcome to Rosa's Journey. Hello, dear readers. Welcome to a story that transcends time and touches our souls. Today we'll dive into Imperial Brazil of 1878, an era when coffee gilded the farms of the Paraíba Valley, but where not everyone shared in this wealth. Our protagonist is Rosa, a 19-year-old young woman who knows suffering intimately, but carries within herself a force capable of transforming not only her own life, but also the world around her. This is a story about how true love can flourish in the most unlikely places, how dignity can emerge from humiliation, and how a courageous soul can plant seeds of change that will germinate for generations. Opening hook. Imagine a young woman waking before the roosters even crow, her hands already calloused at 19, washing, cooking, serving, but in her eyes shines something that no cruelty could extinguish, a spark of hope that is about to ignite her life in unimaginable ways. Where are you watching me from? Leave your city in the comments. It's always exciting to know that our story reaches hearts in every corner of the world, and if this narrative touches your hearts as much as it touched mine while writing it, don't forget to leave that precious like and subscribe to the channel for more stories that warm the soul. Year 1878. Location Paraíba Valley, province of São Paulo, Imperial Brazil. Chapter 1. The House of Suffering. Dawn was still just a violet promise on the horizon when Rosa opened her eyes. Her bare feet touched the cold earthen floor, and for an instant, just a brief instant, she allowed herself to imagine what it would be like to wake naturally, with the sun kissing her face through lace curtains. The Santos family house breathed humidity and sadness. The wattle and daub walls exhaled the acrid smell of clay, mixed with tears from years of rain that seeped through poorly fitted roofs. Rosa moved like a shadow through the dark rooms, her gestures precise and silent, the fruit of years learning to be invisible. In the tiny kitchen, her hands, delicate despite the calluses, lit the fire in the wood stove. Smoke danced through the environment, like ghosts of lost dreams. Rosa didn't need light to find each utensil. She knew that space like a blind person knows their cane. "Rosa!" Gertrude's voice cut through the morning silence like a blade. The young woman felt her muscles contract involuntarily. Her mother appeared in the doorway, disheveled hair framing a face hardened by bitterness. Gertrude Santos was a woman who had lost much, her husband, her youth, her hope, and poured this loss onto her eldest daughter as if Rosa were responsible for all of destiny's cruelties. "The coffee is taking too long," murmured Gertrude, her small dark eyes scanning Rosa for any imperfection. "Anna needs to be well fed for her piano lessons." Rosa nodded silently. Anna, the youngest daughter of only 16, slept late in her room, which, though small, had a window and flowered calico curtains. Rosa had long ago stopped questioning why Anna deserved the maternal love that was denied to her. The hours poured slowly like dark honey. Rosa washed clothes in the yard basin, her back curved under the weight of water-heavy sheets. The sun climbed lazily in the December sky, painting the jabuticaba tree leaves with golden tones that made Rosa remember her father. Francisco Santos had been a gentleman who worked on the railway, and always returned with a wildflower for her. He had died when Rosa turned 7, victim of a fever that devastated the region. With him had also died the only source of affection in her life. The bell of the main church rang at noon when Father Miguel appeared at the door. The clergyman was a corpulent man, with a well-groomed white beard and kind eyes that always found Rosa with special tenderness. He carried in his hands a well-crafted straw hat and the air of one bearing good news. "Dona Gertrudes," he greeted, removing his hat in an elegant gesture. "I've come to bring a proposal that might interest you." Rosa continued hanging clothes on the line, but her ears perked up. Any change in the house's routine was like a stone thrown into a lake. The waves might reach her. "Come in, Father." Gertrude's assumed a honeyed tone, reserved only for important visitors. "Anna, come greet Father Miguel." The younger sister emerged from her room, beautiful like a porcelain doll with her blonde hair brushed and clean cotton dress. Rosa felt a familiar pang in her chest, not of envy but of sweet sadness for the life Anna would never know existed. "Baron Carlos Barbosa de Almeida needs temporary workers on his plantation," explained the priest, settling into the house's only good chair. "São Sebastião is a prosperous property that offers good pay and dignified treatment. I thought perhaps—" Gertrude interrupted him with a brusque hand gesture. "Anna can't go. She has her studies, her lessons. But Rosa—" The woman's eyes gleamed with a cruel light. Rosa could be useful. Rosa felt her heart accelerate. The possibility of leaving that house, even temporarily, was like spotting a star on a stormy night. It would be good for the girl, agreed the priest, casting a compassionate look in Rosa's direction. Honest work in a Christian environment. That afternoon, while folding dry clothes, Rosa allowed herself to dream. She imagined green fields, people who might speak to her without rudeness, a place where her steps wouldn't need to be silent like a thief's. For the first time in years, hope nestled in her chest like a little bird seeking shelter. When the afternoon shadows lengthened across the house, Gertrude called Rosa for a conversation. The young woman found her mother on the back porch, contemplating the yard where only weeds and some skinny chickens grew. "You're going to the plantation tomorrow," she announced without preamble. "I need the money you'll earn, and I want you back in 3 months, understand?" Rosa nodded, but a question burned on her lips. "Why can't Anna go too, Mother?" Gertrude turned with flaming eyes. "Because Anna is special. Anna has a future. You—" She made a cruel pause. "You're just like your father, and look how that turned out." The words fell on Rosa like icy stones, but this time, instead of pain, she felt something different growing within her. A small rebellion, a spark of dignity that insisted on shining despite everything. That night, lying on her straw cot in the corner of the kitchen, Rosa looked through the cracks in the boards at the stars. Tomorrow would be different. She didn't know how or why, but she felt it with the certainty of one who recognizes their own breathing. Tomorrow would be the first day of a new life. The night wind whispered through the gaps in the house like an ancient promise, carrying with it the perfume of jasmine flowers that grew wild in the neighboring vacant lot. Rosa closed her eyes, and for the first time in many years, slept smiling. But something more awaited Rosa beyond the gates of Saint Sebastian plantation, something that would transform not only her life, but also her heart in ways she could never imagine. Chapter 2. The Divine Opportunity. Father Miguel's cart swayed gently along the red dirt road that wound between hills covered with coffee. Rosa held tight to the small bundle containing her few belongings, 2 changes of clothes, a wooden comb that had been her grandmother's, and a small image of St. Anthony that her father had given her. December 1878 painted the landscape with golden tones. The plantation stretched like a dark green sea dotted with red fruits promising a good harvest. Rosa had never traveled so far from home, and each curve of the road revealed wonders: larger houses with tended gardens, corrals where cattle grazed peacefully, and in the distance the imposing silhouette of Saint Sebastian plantation. "It's a prosperous plantation," commented Father Miguel, noticing the amazement in the young woman's eyes. "Baron Carlos is a just man. He lost his wife some years ago and since then has devoted himself entirely to the property." Rosa absorbed every word, every detail of the unfolding landscape. The air had a different smell here, less acrid, less heavy. One breathed hope, mixed with the perfume of wildflowers that bordered the road. When the plantation gates appeared in sight, Rosa felt her breath catch. 2 stone columns supported a wrought iron arch reading Saint Sebastian Plantation, 1850. Beyond the gates, a path lined with imperial palms led to a colonial-style mansion painted white with blue details that reflected the afternoon sky. "My God," whispered Rosa, and these were the first words she had spoken during the entire journey. The cart stopped in front of the house's side entrance, where a woman of about 50 awaited. Señora Teodora was tall, elegantly postured, with graying hair pulled back in an impeccable chignon. Her dark dress, though simple, had the perfect cut of one who knows the art of presenting oneself well. "Rosa Santos?" she asked with a firm but not hostile voice. "Yes, ma'am." Rosa descended from the cart, her legs trembling slightly. "I am the housekeeper of this house. Here you will work and sleep while you are with us. There are rules that must be respected, but there is also dignity for those who work with honesty." Rosa nodded, feeling something strange and new. She was being treated with respect. Father Miguel bid farewell with a warm wave and a promise to visit her soon. The cart moved away, taking with it the last link to her previous life. Señora Teodora led Rosa through a side corridor that led to the workers' quarters. The walls were whitewashed clean and the red brick floor shone as if it were waxed. Plants in clay pots decorated the corners, creating a welcoming environment that Rosa had never experienced. "This will be your bed," indicated Teodora, showing a small but organized room with 2 iron beds, each covered with colorful patchwork quilts. "You'll share with Rita, an Italian girl who arrived 2 months ago." The Italian appeared at that moment, a young woman with curly brown hair and a contagious smile. She spoke Portuguese mixed with words from her homeland, gesticulating much and filling the environment with joy. "Rosa, what a bello name. I'm Rita. You'll like it very much here. It's molto different from other places." Rosa smiled timidly. Rita was like a ray of sunshine. Impossible to remain indifferent to her positive energy. Sina Teodora showed her the rest of the facilities. The large kitchen commanded by a black woman with sweet eyes and a maternal smile. The gardens where some women sewed while chatting softly. And finally the laundry, where Rosa would work. "Na Fortunata takes care of the kitchen and is like a second mother to all of us," explained Teodora. "Respect her as you would respect your own family." Fortunata, 58 years old, had in her calloused hands the history of a life of work, but her eyes shone with wisdom and kindness. She had been enslaved for more than 30 years, had won her freedom through much effort, and was now one of the most respected people on the plantation. "Beautiful girl," said Fortunata, welcoming Rosa with a maternal embrace that the young woman hadn't received since her father's death. "You have sadness in your eyes, but you also have light. Here that light will be able to shine." Rosa felt tears burn her eyes. Kindness was something so rare in her life that she didn't know how to receive it. The afternoon was dedicated to learning the house routine. Rosa discovered there were established hours for meals, and that she could eat at the table like a person, not standing in the kitchen as she did at home. She discovered there were Sundays off, that she could bathe in the river when she wanted, and that no one shouted or raised their hand to the workers. "Here nobody hits anybody," declared Teodora firmly when Rosa asked about the rules. "This is the most important law of São Sebastião plantation." When night descended over the property, Rosa lay in her new bed, a true luxury with a clean straw mattress and cotton sheet. Through the window she could see the yellow lights sprouting from the mansion's windows and hear the distant murmur of conversations and laughter. Rita told stories of her native Italy, of vineyards on hills and the smell of fresh bread her mother made every morning. Rosa listened fascinated, discovering that worlds existed beyond the walls of suffering in which she had grown up. "And you, Rosa, where do you come from?" asked Rita with genuine curiosity. Rosa hesitated. How to explain a life of humiliations without sounding pitiful? "From a small house," she said simply, "but that doesn't matter anymore." "Bello, here everyone starts new, like a new Vita." Rosa looked through the window cracks at the starry sky. Yes, perhaps Rita was right. Perhaps this was the place where she could discover who she really was, beyond the rejected daughter, beyond the mistreated maid. But Rosa didn't know that at that exact moment, a few hundred meters away in the mansion's library, a man with penetrating eyes was writing in his diary an observation that would change everything. "A new worker arrived today. There's something in her eyes I can't decipher, a silent dignity that awakens my curiosity." Rosa slept deeply for the first time in years, lulled by the song of crickets and the revolutionary sensation of feeling safe. Illustrating Chapter 3, A World of Possibilities. Dawn at São Sebastião plantation came accompanied by a symphony Rosa had never heard, the melodious song of Bem TV, the whisper of wind in the coffee grove's canopy, and the cheerful bubbling of the fountain that decorated the mansion's garden. She woke without the usual startle, without fear of being late or having forgotten some task. Rita still slept, a gentle smile on her lips, hands folded under her face like a child. Rosa dressed silently and went to the kitchen, where she found Na Fortunata already active, preparing breakfast with precise and caring movements. "Good morning, child," greeted Fortunata, offering her a steaming cup. "Did you sleep well in the new bed?" "Better than in many years," confessed Rosa, feeling the hot liquid go down her throat like a blessing. The kitchen was a world apart. Copper pots gleamed hanging on the walls, aromatic herbs dried in bundles tied to the ceiling beams, and the wood stove radiated a welcoming warmth that transformed the environment into a permanent embrace. Fortunata moved through it like a priestess in her temple, seasoning, tasting, adjusting flavors with the wisdom of one who had transformed the act of cooking into art. "The Baron likes his coffee strong but not bitter," she explained, while preparing the tray that would be taken to the mansion. "He's a man of refined palate, though of simple customs." Rosa helped arrange the workers' breakfast table when Sinha Teodora appeared, elegant even in the simplicity of her grey dress. "Rosa, come with me. I want to show you where you'll work." They walked through perfumed gardens where roses, jasmine, and dahlias competed in beauty and fragrance. Rosa had never imagined such profusion of colors and aromas could exist in one place. Each flower bed was a work of art, each path a discovery. The laundry was in a separate building, near the stream that cut through the property. The place was airy, with large windows that allowed the morning breeze to enter. Several wooden tubs gleamed clean, and clotheslines stretched between leafy trees. "You'll work here with Candida," Teodora introduced. Candida was a 28-year-old woman, a widow with 3 small children who ran around like free little birds. She had the strong hands of one who knows hard work, but the serene face of one who had found peace even in difficulties. "Welcome, Rosa," smiled Candida. "Here the work is heavy, but the heart becomes light. You'll see." And Rosa saw. In the following hours, while washing sheets and towels in the stream's crystalline waters, she felt something she had forgotten could exist, the satisfaction of work well done without the threat of punishment. Candida hummed songs while working, and the children played on the grass, creating a home atmosphere that Rosa absorbed like dry earth absorbs rain. Around noon, when the sun was strongest, the women took a break in the shade of a centennial mango tree. Candida shared fruit with Rosa, telling her about life on the plantation. "The Baron is a different man," she said, peeling an orange with skillful fingers. "He lost his wife 3 years ago, in a difficult childbirth. Since then, he's become more silent, more dedicated to work. But he's never been unjust to us." Rosa listened, fascinated. A man who respected workers was something almost mythical in her experience. "He's very young to be a widower," she commented. 35 years old. Good age to start over, but they say he still loves the deceased very much. They were a very united couple. The afternoon passed in work and conversations. Rosa felt like a plant that, after years in arid soil, finally found fertile ground and abundant rain. Each kind word, each genuine smile was nourishment for her thirsty soul. At day's end, while hanging the last washed clothes, Candida made an observation that made Rosa stop. "You have ladies' hands, Rosa. Delicate, despite the calluses, and a way of walking as if you were born for salons, not for washing basins." Rosa looked at her own hands, surprised. She had never thought of herself as having anything special. "My mother always said I'm too common," she murmured. "Your mother was wrong," declared Candida firmly. "There's something rare in you, a dignity that isn't learned, that one brings in the soul." That night, at dinner time, Rosa met more plantation workers. There was Maria das Dores, specialist in sewing and embroidery, Joanna, who cared for chickens and pigs, and Benedita, responsible for the garden. All welcomed her with sincerity, sharing stories and laughter around the simple but abundant table. "Here we are a family," explained Rita, gesticulating animatedly. "Not la familia of blood, but familia of choice. Molto importante, si?" Rosa nodded, feeling something warm and sweet grow in her chest. Family. How long since she'd known what that was? When she retired to sleep, Rosa lay with a lighter heart than she remembered feeling. Through the window, she could see the mansion illuminated, and for a brief moment, imagined what life would be like inside. Would the Baron be a solitary man walking through elegant halls? Did he also feel the need to belong somewhere, to be accepted as he was? She pushed away these thoughts as foolish daydreams. She was just a temporary laundress, and he was the plantation master. Worlds that would never touch. But destiny sometimes has its own surprising plans. The next morning, while Rosa hung white sheets that fluttered in the wind like surrender flags, a man stopped in the shadow of a jabuticaba tree and watched her for long minutes. There was something in the way she moved, a natural grace, an economy of gestures that spoke of inner strength, that made him forget the letter in his hands and the day's commitments. Carlos Barbosa de Almeida didn't yet know it, but he had just seen the woman who would transform his life forever. Chapter 4. The First Encounter. It was a January morning when the impossible happened. Rosa knelt by the stream's edge, her skirts carefully folded to avoid getting wet, washing a fine cotton shirt that belonged to the mansion. The crystalline water reflected her concentrated face, and she hummed softly a tune her father used to sing in happier times. The sun filtered through the leaves of riverside trees, creating a play of light and shadow that danced over the water. Rosa dipped the delicate fabric, soaped it carefully, and rinsed until the white was immaculate. It was work that required patience and care, qualities she possessed in abundance. It was then she felt a presence, not an invasive or threatening gaze, but respectful attention that made her slowly raise her eyes. On the other side of the stream, partially hidden by the shadow of a leafy tree, a man watched her. Rosa recognized him immediately, though she had never seen him up close. Carlos Barbosa de Almeida, the Baron, lord of those lands. He was younger than she had imagined, with dark brown hair slightly disheveled by the morning wind and eyes that seemed to carry the weight of many reflections. He wore simple clothes, linen pants and cotton shirt open at the collar, as if he didn't care about formalities when on his lands. For an eternal moment their gazes met through the water's mirror. Rosa felt her heart accelerate, not from fear, but from a strange emotion she couldn't name. There was something in his eyes, a respectful curiosity, a sadness that recognized her own sadness. Instinctively, Rosa lowered her eyes and resumed work, but her hands trembled slightly. She felt he remained there, watching her, and a mixture of shyness and something like panic began to grow in her chest. Without finishing the washing, Rosa stood abruptly, gathered the wet clothes, and moved away toward the laundry. Her heart beat so hard she feared it could be heard. What was the plantation master doing watching a simple washerwoman, and why had that exchange of glances disturbed her so much? During the rest of the morning, Rosa remained restless. Candida noticed her agitation. "Did something happen, child?" "Nothing, no," murmured Rosa, but her cheek still maintained a delicate blush. In the afternoon, when she thought she had forgotten the incident, Sinha Theodora appeared in the laundry with an unusual request. "Rosa, the Baron would like to speak with you." Rosa's stomach plummeted. Had she done something wrong? Would the plantation master dismiss her for some reason she didn't know? Theodora noticed her panic. "Nothing serious, child. He just has a proposal to make you." Rosa followed the housekeeper down a path she had never taken, the one leading to the mansion's private gardens. There, everything was even more refined. Perfectly geometric flower beds, ornamental fountains, stone benches under jasmine-covered pergolas. Carlos waited beside an improvised bookstand under a grape-laden arbor. On the rustic table, several books were arranged, some open, others carefully stacked. "Rosa Santos?" he asked with a grave but gentle voice. "Yes, sir," she replied, keeping her eyes down. "Please, you don't need to call me sir. Carlos is fine." "Please sit," Rosa obeyed, choosing the edge of a stone bench, hands clasped in her lap. Carlos remained standing, but in a gesture that surprised her, he crouched to be at her eye level. "I learned from Father Miguel that you know how to read." "A little, yes. My father taught me before he died. Would you like to learn more?" The question was so unexpected that Rosa finally raised her eyes. Carlos was close enough for her to see the small wrinkles around his eyes, marks of one who smiled, but also of one who knew pain. Why?" she asked in an almost inaudible voice. "Because I believe every person has the right to knowledge, and because I perceived something special in you." Rosa felt breathless. No one had ever seen anything special in her. "I could teach you on Sunday afternoons, here in the gardens." "If you'd like, of course." The proposal was too tempting to be real. Rosa fought against an inner voice whispering it was impossible, that men like Carlos only helped women like her when they wanted something in return. But there was sincerity in his eyes, a kindness she recognized because it was too rare to be falsified. "I would like that very much," she finally replied. Carlos smiled, the first true smile Rosa saw from him, and for a moment he seemed much younger. "Then we'll start next Sunday." Rosa stood to leave, but Carlos stopped her with a gentle question. "May I ask, are you happy here?" The question caught her off guard. Happiness was a concept Rosa had stored in the drawer of impossibilities so long ago that she no longer knew how to define it. "I'm treated with kindness," she replied carefully. "That's already more than I've known in life." Carlos frowned, as if that answer saddened him. "Kindness should be the minimum, not the maximum." Rosa didn't know what to respond. She withdrew with a respectful bow and moved away through the gardens, but could feel his gaze following her until she disappeared among the trees. That night, lying in her bed, Rosa stared at the ceiling, reliving every moment of the encounter. Something was happening, something that frightened and fascinated her at the same time. Carlos hadn't looked at her as other men looked at women of her condition. There was no lust in his eyes, no condescension. There was recognition, as if he saw something in her that she herself didn't know she possessed. Rita, in her bed, whispered what seemed like a prayer in Italian. Outside, crickets sang their nocturnal music, and Rosa, for the first time in her life, fell asleep thinking about tomorrow, with expectation instead of fear. But like all important changes, this one would also come accompanied by turbulence that would test the newly discovered strength of her soul. Chapter 5. The Storm and the Shelter. The first Sunday of lessons arrived heavy, with clouds threatening to burst at any moment. Rosa wore her best dress, a faded blue cotton that Rita had helped tighten at the waist, and headed to the gardens with her heart pounding. Carlos was already there, organizing books under a white-painted wrought-iron gazebo that would offer protection should rain come. He wore even simpler clothes than before, raw linen shirt and cotton pants, but had on his face an expression of contentment that made him look like a boy about to show a special treasure. "Rosa, good that you came," he smiled, seeing her approach. "I thought perhaps the rain might discourage you." "Rain has never discouraged me from anything," she replied, and immediately blushed for sounding bolder than intended. Carlos laughed, a low, pleasant sound that mixed with the wind's murmur in the leaves. "I like that attitude. Sit down, I'll show you what I brought." Rosa settled in the wicker chair he had provided, keeping her back straight and hands folded in her lap, as Sinha Theodora had taught her was proper. Carlos took a book with a worn green cover and opened it to the first page. "Let's begin with simple stories, but well written. This one is by Machado de Assis. Do you know him?" Rosa shook her head no, and Carlos began reading with a clear, expressive voice. "Marcela loved me for 15 months and 11 contos de res." His voice had a hypnotic quality, and Rosa found herself completely absorbed, not just by the words, but by the way Carlos gave himself to the reading. She realized he had chosen that text carefully, a story about relationships between people of different classes. When he finished the first paragraph, Carlos looked at her. "What did you think?" "It's different from what I expected," said Rosa, choosing her words carefully. "The author seems to be mocking something." "Exactly," Carlos became animated. "Machado has this gift of showing human contradictions without being cruel. You have sensitivity for literature." Rosa felt a wave of pride. No one had ever praised her intelligence. They spent the next hour reading and discussing. Carlos asked questions that stimulated her thinking, never making her feel ignorant when she didn't know something. On the contrary, he explained with patience, as if he genuinely believed she was capable of understanding anything. It was then the first drop fell, and then another. In seconds, the sky opened in one of those torrential summer rains that transform the world into a water curtain. "Let's go to the library veranda," suggested Carlos, quickly gathering the books. They ran together through the soaked gardens, Rosa holding her skirts to avoid tripping, both laughing like children escaping mischief. They arrived at the mansion's veranda, completely wet, breathless, and euphoric. The library was an environment Rosa had never imagined could exist. The walls were covered with floor-to-ceiling shelves, filled with books of all sizes and colors. Leather armchairs invited reading, and a lit fireplace, as the day was cold despite being summer, created an atmosphere of coziness and intimacy. "My wife loved this place," said Carlos, his voice suddenly carrying a melancholy that Rosa felt as an echo in her own chest. "She said a house without books is like a body without a soul." Rosa looked around, wonderstruck, absorbing every detail. She approached one of the shelves and delicately passed her fingers over the book spines, as if they were sacred objects. "I've never seen so many books together," she murmured. "You can come here whenever you want," offered Carlos impulsively. "To read, to study. This library should be alive, not become a mausoleum." Rosa turned to him, surprised. You would do that? For me?" "Rosa." Carlos took a step toward her, and there was something in his eyes that made her feel the world was changing around them. "You're not just a washerwoman to me. There's something in you, a dignity, an intelligence that deserves to be cultivated." Rosa's heart beat so hard she feared he could hear it. Something was happening between them, something she had no words to name, but felt growing like a plant seeks light. "I don't understand," she whispered. "Neither do I," confessed Carlos, and Rosa saw he too was confused, also navigating unknown waters. "I only know that when I saw you for the first time washing clothes at the stream, I thought, this woman has a beauty that's not in her face but in her soul, and I want to know that soul." The words fell between them like petals from a rare flower. Rosa felt tears burn her eyes, not from sadness, but from an emotion so intense her small body could barely contain it. "You don't know me," she said with an emotional voice. "If you knew me—" "What?" Carlos moved closer, his voice gentle but firm. "If I knew you, would I discover you were mistreated, that you suffered injustices, that you had to be strong too much, too early? Rosa, that doesn't diminish you, that ennobles you." And then something broke inside Rosa. All the tears she had swallowed over the years, all the pain she had kept silent so as not to bother anyone, all the loneliness she carried like a secret burden. Everything came to the surface at once. She cried as she hadn't since childhood, with sobs that seemed to come from a deep well within her. And Carlos, without saying a word, offered her his handkerchief and remained by her side, respecting her pain, giving her space to feel. When she finally calmed down, Rosa felt strangely light, as if she had been washed inside. "Forgive me," she murmured, embarrassed. "For what? For being human? For having feelings?" Carlos smiled tenderly. "Rosa, you've spent so much time apologizing for existing that you forgot your existence is a gift to the world." Outside, rain continued falling, drumming against the windows as if protecting that intimate moment from the rest of the world. Rosa looked at Carlos and saw he also looked at her, not with pity, not with desire, but with something much more precious, with recognition. "I think I need to go," she said finally, though every fiber of her being wanted to stay there forever. "Of course," agreed Carlos, though his eyes said he didn't want her to leave either. As Rosa headed for the door, he called softly, "Rosa, next Sunday, if you'd like, we can continue reading Machado, or any other book that awakens your curiosity." She turned and smiled, the first truly happy smile Carlos saw on her face. "I want to." And she ran out into the rain, leaving behind a man who had just discovered that the heart he thought was dead was actually just hibernating, waiting for the right woman to awaken. But true changes never come without resistance, and forces greater than them were already moving to test the solidity of that nascent feeling. Chapter 6. The Awakening of Hearts. The weeks that followed were like a gradual awakening from a long, silent dream. Rosa found herself awaiting Sundays with a sweet anxiety that accompanied her throughout the week. Work in the laundry became lighter, days more colorful, and even the bird's song seemed to have gained a new melody. Carlos, in turn, rediscovered in Rosa's company a facet of himself he thought lost forever. Her natural intelligence, genuine curiosity, and the way she absorbed each new knowledge like a sponge, absorbs water, fascinated him so much that he began seeking specific books that might interest her. On a particularly beautiful Sunday in February, when the garden flowers competed in exuberance, Carlos suggested they do their reading while walking through the coffee groves. "It's good to know the land that sustains you," he said, offering her his arm with a gentleness that had become natural between them. Rosa accepted the invitation, but carefully maintained a few centimeters of distance. She still fought against an inner voice, warning her about the impossibility of that friendship, about the different worlds they belonged to. They walked through the coffee rows, where plants heavy with red fruits promised an abundant harvest. Carlos spoke about planting techniques, about coffee seasons, about how he loved that land inherited from his father. Rosa listened, fascinated, discovering there was poetry even in agriculture when told by someone who loved what they did. "Have you ever thought about traveling?" asked Carlos suddenly, stopping under the shade of a leafy tree. "Where to?" Rosa smiled with melancholy. "People like me don't travel. People like me just survive." "Don't say that." Carlos turned to her, and there was an intensity in his eyes that made her tremble. "Rosa, you're not people like you. You're unique, and you deserve to see the world, know other cultures, other books, other forms of beauty." Rosa lowered her eyes, feeling her cheeks burn. "Why are you being so kind to me?" The question came out more direct than she intended. Carlos remained silent for a long moment, as if fighting an inner battle. "Because," he began, then stopped, breathed deeply and restarted. "Because when I look at you, I see someone who makes me believe I can still be a better person. Because your company brings me a peace I haven't felt in 3 years. Because," his voice lowered to almost a whisper, "because I fell in love with you." The words hung in the air like butterflies that had just landed. Rosa felt the world spin around her. Impossible, unbelievable, but true. "Carlos," she murmured, and it was the first time she pronounced his name without formality. "I know it's madness," he continued, approaching slightly. "I know society will say it's inappropriate, that we're from different worlds, but my heart doesn't understand social classes, Rosa. My heart only knows you're the most extraordinary woman I've ever met." Rosa felt tears burn her eyes. "You don't really know me," she protested weakly. "If you knew where I came from, how I lived—" "I know you came from a house where you weren't valued," interrupted Carlos gently. "I know you suffered injustices no person should suffer. I know you're braver than you imagine, and stronger than you should have had to be. And all that only makes me admire you more." The wind blew gently through the coffee groves, carrying the perfume of coffee flowers beginning to bloom. Rosa looked at that man who had transformed her life in just a few weeks and saw not just a landowner, but a human being with his own wounds, his own loneliness, his own heart. "I also," she began, but her voice failed. "You also what?" encouraged Carlos tenderly. "I also feel something different when I'm with you," she finally confessed. "Something that frightens me because I've never felt it before." Carlos smiled, and it was as if the sun emerged from clouds. "How you don't need to be afraid, Rosa. What's between us is pure, it's true. But people will say, let people say what they want," declared Carlos, with a firmness Rosa hadn't known in him. "I won't live my life based on others' prejudices. I've already wasted 3 years being a ghost of myself. I won't waste more time." Rosa looked around, at the golden coffee groves, at the cloudless blue sky, at that man who spoke of love as if it were the most natural thing in the world. And for the first time in her life, she allowed herself to believe she deserved to be loved. "What are you proposing?" she asked in a very low voice. "That you give me a chance to court you properly, that you allow me to show the world you're a lady worthy of all respect, that we build something real and lasting. And if it doesn't work out?" "And if it does?" smiled Carlos, moving closer. "Rosa, life has already denied us much. Let's not deny ourselves the chance to be happy." And then, on a golden February afternoon, under the perfumed shade of a tree, in the middle of coffee groves that witnessed the birth of many loves, Rosa Santos allowed Carlos Barbosa de Almeida to delicately hold her hand. The touch was electric, but also comforting, as if two lost halves had finally found each other. "Then yes," murmured Rosa. "You may court me." And in that moment, the future she had never dreamed possible began to take shape, golden and promising, like the light of that afternoon they would never forget. But every true love needs to be tested by life's storms, and the first one was closer than they imagined. Chapter 7. Resistances and Revelations. News of the courtship between the Baron and the washerwoman spread through the region like fire in dry straw. In less than a week, the entire plantation whispered about the matter, and echoes reached neighboring mansions, churches, and small shops in nearby villages. Sinha Teodora was the first to approach Rosa about the situation. On a cloudy March morning, while Rosa folded sheets in the laundry, the housekeeper appeared with a worried expression she couldn't completely disguise. "Rosa, I need to talk with you." Candida understood the message and discreetly withdrew, taking the small children to play farther away. Rosa continued folding clothes, but felt the weight of Teodora's gaze upon her. "It's about Mr. Carlos," said the housekeeper without beating around the bush. "I imagined it would be," murmured Rosa, keeping her eyes fixed on her work. "Child, do you understand the situation you're in? People are talking a lot." Rosa finally raised her face. "And what are they saying?" Teodora sighed deeply. "They're saying you bewitched the master, that you took advantage of his loneliness to get a better life. They're saying even worse things." "And you?" asked Rosa firmly. "What do you think?" The question caught Teodora by surprise. The housekeeper studied the young woman's face for a long moment. "I think you're an honest girl, that I've never seen you do anything inappropriate or self-serving. I think Mr. Carlos hasn't smiled in 3 years like he's been smiling lately, but I also think you're walking on very dangerous ground." Rosa folded the last sheet and placed it carefully on the pile. "Are you asking me to distance myself from him?" "I'm just saying be careful. There are powerful forces against you. Colonel Albuquerque from the neighboring plantation already came to talk to me about the scandal. Father Miguel is being pressured to intervene." That afternoon, as if summoned by Teodora's words, Father Miguel appeared at the plantation. Rosa saw him talking at length with Carlos on the mansion's veranda, serious gestures, worried expressions. Her heart tightened with fear. An hour later, Carlos sought her in the gardens, where she was watering flowers at Sinha Teodora's request. His face bore attention she hadn't known before. "We need to talk," he said, and there was something in his voice that made Rosa feel the world was about to collapse again. They walked in silence to the gazebo, where they had shared so many happy moments. Carlos waited for her to sit before speaking. "Father Miguel is worried. He says our closeness is causing scandal in the region." Rosa nodded, already expecting this. "And now?" she asked in a controlled voice, though her heart was breaking. "Now?" Carlos knelt before her, taking her hands in his. "Now I need to know if you have enough courage to face the world with me." The question wasn't what Rosa expected. "I don't understand. Rosa, I won't give up on you. I won't pretend I don't feel what I feel. just to satisfy others' prejudices. But I need to know if you're willing to fight for us." Rosa felt her heart accelerate. "What does that mean?" "It means I want to formalize our commitment. I want to publicly announce that I intend to marry you." The world stopped. Rosa felt as if she were floating. "Marry," she whispered. "Marry," confirmed Carlos firmly. "I know it will be difficult. I know we'll face resistance, but I believe our love is strong enough to overcome any obstacle." Rosa stood and walked to the gazebo's edge, looking at the gardens she had learned to love. Carlos had offered her not just love, but respectability, a future she had never dreamed possible. But would it be fair to accept, knowing the consequences this would bring him? "Carlos," she said finally, turning to him, "you would lose much by marrying me. Respect, friendship, social position, and I'd gain everything that truly matters," he interrupted, approaching. "I'd gain a companion I love, a woman who makes me want to be better, a life worth living." Rosa studied his face, looking for signs of doubt or regret. She found only determination and tenderness. "People will never accept me as your wife," she said realistically. "Some won't," agreed Carlos, "but others will, and in time our example might help change mentalities. Rosa, you're not just the woman I love. You're someone who can make a difference in the world. Me, you, with your dignity, your intelligence, your capacity to forgive and love despite everything you've suffered. Rosa, you've taught me more about kindness in 2 months than I learned in my entire life." The tears Rosa had tried to contain finally flowed down her face. "I'm afraid," she confessed. "So am I," admitted Carlos. "But I'd rather be afraid by your side than safe alone." Rosa looked one last time at the gardens, at the plantation that had become her home, at the man who offered her an impossible future to dream, and for the first time in her life, she decided to bet on happiness. "Yes," she said, her voice growing in strength and conviction. "Yes, I want to marry you." Carlos smiled as she had never seen him smile, took her in his arms and spun her in the air. When he set her back down, his eyes shone with joy and relief. "Then let's show the world that true love knows no barriers." And that afternoon, in the perfumed gardens of San Sebastian plantation, an unlikely but true love decided to face whatever storms the world might bring. But the first storm was much closer than they imagined, and would come from where they least expected. Naferintus, Jarplater 8, the unexpected storm. It was on a stifling April afternoon, when the heavy air announced rain, that the first great test of Carlos and Rosa's love presented itself in a brutal and unexpected way. Rosa was in the laundry, helping Candida iron the mansion's fine clothes, when a thunder of horses approached the plantation. From the noise, there were at least 3 or 4 people, something unusual, as visitors generally arrived by carriage. Signa Teodora appeared at the laundry door with an alarmed expression. "Rosa, your mother is here, and she's not alone." The iron Rosa was holding slipped from her hands, falling with a metallic noise onto the ironing board. Candida looked at her worriedly. "Do you want me to go with you?" she offered. Rosa shook her head, trying to control the tremor in her hands. It had been 2 months since she'd seen Gertrude's, and her mother's sudden appearance could only mean trouble. She headed to the house's front courtyard, where she found a scene that made her stop abruptly. Gertrude's was there, visibly agitated, accompanied by 2 men Rosa didn't know, men of rough appearance, with travel-dirty clothes and threatening looks. "There she is!" exclaimed Gertrude upon spotting her daughter. "My disobedient daughter, who forgot about her family." Carlos emerged from the mansion, alerted by the noise. His face assumed a serious expression as he evaluated the situation. "Rosa," he called, but kept at a respectful distance. Gertrude followed Rosa's gaze, and her eyes narrowed upon seeing Carlos. "Ah, so it's true," she said with a malicious smile. "My daughter found herself a rich protector." "Mother, please," Rosa tried to speak, but Gertrude interrupted her with a brusque gesture. "Don't give me mother, please. You came here to work for 3 months and send money home." "It's been 2 months since I've sent news, haven't sent a single penny." "I send the money every Sunday with Father Miguel," protested Rosa. "Lies!" shouted Gertrude. "We've received nothing, and now I discover why. My daughter is too busy seducing the master to remember the family that raised her." Carlos stepped forward. "Madam, I ask that you calm down, and—" "You don't ask anything!" Gertrude turned on him like a snake ready to strike. "You're the one corrupting my daughter, taking advantage of her poverty." "That's not true," Rosa found courage to speak. "Carlos treats me with respect, offered me education." The slap came so fast, Rosa had no time to dodge. The sound echoed through the courtyard like a gunshot, and tense silence settled. Carlos moved instinctively toward Rosa, but she gestured for him to stop. She knew her mother too well to know any intervention would only make things worse. "Education?" laughed Gertrude bitterly. "Is that what they call it now? Rosa, you're ungrateful. You forgot that Anna is starving at home while you play lady here?" "Anna is starving?" Rosa felt her heart tighten. "She is." One of the men accompanying Gertrude's spoke for the first time. "And we came to collect what's ours." Carlos studied the men with growing attention. "Who are these men?" he asked Gertrude's. "They're my friends," she replied evasively. "They came to accompany me." But Rosa knew that type of friend. There was something in their looks, their posture, that smelled of danger. "How much money do you want?" Carlos asked the men directly. 50,000 reis, replied one of them, an exorbitant amount. Carlos didn't hesitate. "Rosa earns 15,000 reis per month. In 2 months, that's 30,000 reis. I'll pay the difference from my own pocket." "No," protested Rosa. "I send the money religiously. Father Miguel can confirm it." Gertrude's and the men exchanged quick glances, enough for Carlos to realize something was wrong with this story. "Perhaps we should talk more calmly," suggested Carlos. "In the parlor, like civilized people." "We don't need a parlor," one of the men assumed a threatening tone. "We need the money. Now." It was then Rosa understood. The men weren't just Gertrude's friends. There were debts involved, pressure, maybe even threats. Her mother was in danger, and Rosa was seen as the solution to the problems. "I'll go with you," said Rosa suddenly. "No," Carlos was categorical. "Rosa, you can't." "Yes, I can." Rosa turned to him with determined eyes. "It's my family, my responsibility." But Carlos had made his own decision. "Gentlemen," he addressed the men with a firm voice, "I'll pay 100,000 reis for you to leave Rosa alone, permanently." The silence that followed was tense. Gertrude looked at Carlos with a mixture of surprise and greed. The men whispered among themselves. 100,000 reis is a lot of money," said one of them finally, "but we want it paid now." "It will be." Carlos called one of the overseers who was watching the scene from a distance. "João, go get the money from the safe. 100,000 reis. Rosa felt tears burn her eyes. Carlos was literally paying for her freedom. But what kind of man did that for a woman he'd known only 2 months? When the overseer returned with the money, Carlos personally handed it to Gertrude's. "This money should solve whatever problem you have. In exchange, I ask that Rosa be left alone to make her own decisions." Gertrude took the money with trembling hands. For a moment, Rosa saw in her mother not the cruel woman she knew, but a desperate woman, probably threatened, maybe even in danger. "Mother," she called softly, "if you have problems, you can seek me out always." Gertrude looked at her daughter with a complex expression, surprise, hurt, maybe even a glimpse of pride. "You chose your path, Rosa," she said finally. "I hope you're happy on it." And without another word, she mounted the horse and left with the 2 men, leaving behind heavy silence and many unanswered questions. Carlos approached Rosa, who was visibly shaken. "Are you all right?" he asked gently. "You shouldn't have paid," she murmured. 100,000 reis, it's a fortune." "Rosa, look at me." Carlos gently held her face. "There's no money in the world worth more than your safety and happiness." And in that moment, Rosa knew with absolute certainty that she loved that man, not just for what he did for her, but for who he was, someone capable of protecting without dominating, of loving without possessing. But the afternoon still held one last surprise that would test even more deeply the strength of the bond between them. Chapter 9. The Commitment. The weeks following the confrontation with Gertrude's brought a tense calm to São Sebastião plantation. Rosa felt simultaneously relieved and guilty, relieved to be free from her mother's pressure, but guilty about the price Carlos had paid for her freedom. Carlos, in turn, seemed more determined than ever to formalize his commitment to Rosa. In the first week of May, while the coffee groves prepared for harvest, he made a decision that would definitively change the course of their lives. It was a golden Sunday, when Carlos asked Rosa to accompany him on a special walk. They headed to a place she hadn't yet known, a small promontory from where one could see the entire property, the mansion, the coffee groves, the stream winding between trees, the flowering gardens. "This is where I like to come when I need to think," explained Carlos, spreading a blanket over the soft grass. "From here I can see everything my father built, everything I intend to leave to the future." Rosa sat beside him, absorbing the stunning landscape. The wind carried the perfume of coffee flowers, mixed with the aroma of moist earth. "Rosa," Carlos turned to her with a solemnity that made her pay full attention, "there's something I want to give you." He took from his pocket a small, dark blue velvet box. Rosa's hands trembled when he opened it, revealing a simple but beautiful ring, a delicate gold band with a small ruby in the center. "This ring belonged to my grandmother," explained Carlos with an emotional voice. "She was an extraordinary woman who also faced difficulties and prejudices. I believe she would approve of my choice." Rosa was speechless. The ring was simple, but meant something far beyond what her mind could completely process. "Carlos, Rosa Santos," he interrupted gently, taking her left hand. "Will you accept me as your husband? Will you build a life by my side, face together the challenges that will come, and share with me not just joys but also responsibilities?" The tears Rosa was trying to contain finally flowed down her face. "Are you certain?" she asked with an emotional voice. "Certain you won't regret it? Rosa, for 3 years I've lived as an incomplete man. You've returned to me not just joy, but purpose." "Yes, I have absolute certainty." Rosa looked at the ruby that shone in the afternoon light, then at the man who awaited her answer with eyes full of hope and love. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I accept marrying you." Carlos smiled with such happiness he seemed 10 years younger. He slid the ring onto Rosa's finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her. "Now you're officially my fiancée," he said, delicately kissing the hand adorned with the family ring. Rosa admired the ring on her finger, still not completely believing in the reality of that moment. "When?" she asked. "How about September?" suggested Carlos. "After the harvest, when we have more time to organize a celebration worthy of you." Rosa laughed through her tears. "Carlos, I don't need a grand celebration, I just need you. But I want the whole world to know that Rosa Santos is my chosen wife, my valued companion. You deserve to be celebrated, Rosa." They spent the rest of the afternoon making plans, dreaming together, imagining what their married life would be like. Carlos spoke about improvements he wanted to make to the plantation, about the school he intended to build for the workers' children, about trips they would take together. "And you?" he asked. "What are your dreams?" Rosa thought carefully. "I want to learn more. I want to read many books, understand the world beyond what I know. And I want—" She hesitated, then continued with courage. "I want to help other women who went through what I did. I want them to know it's possible to change their lives, that it's possible to be respected." Carlos took her hand and kissed it again. "Then we'll do it together. We'll create opportunities, offer hope. Rosa, you haven't just changed my life. You're going to change many people's lives." When they came down from the promontory, it was already late afternoon. They walked hand in hand, Rosa constantly admiring the ring that now adorned her hand. She felt as if she were living someone else's dream. At the mansion, Carlos gathered all the workers in the main courtyard. Sinha Teodora, Nya Fortunata, Rita, Candida, all approached curiously. "Friends," announced Carlos with a clear, happy voice, "I have the pleasure of announcing that Rosa Santos has accepted to become my wife. We'll marry in September, and I hope to count on everyone's presence and blessing." The silence lasted only a few seconds before exploding in applause and shouts of joy. Rita was the first to run to embrace Rosa, speaking in Italian at an impressive speed. Na Fortunata approached with tears in her eyes. "Child, you deserve all the happiness in the world," she said, embracing Rosa like a mother embraces a beloved daughter. Sinha Teodora, always more contained, approached with dignity. "Congratulations, Rosa. Mr. Carlos made an excellent choice." That night, lying in her bed, Rosa looked at the ring that shone softly in the moonlight. In a few months, her life had been completely transformed, from mistreated maid to fiancée of one of the most respected men in the region. But more than the change in social status, what moved her was the certainty of having found someone who truly loved her, not for her face or body, but for her soul. Someone who saw qualities in her that she herself was just beginning to discover. Rita in her bed whispered prayers of gratitude in Italian. Outside, crickets sang their eternal music, and Rosa, for the first time in her life, fell asleep not just happy, but with the certainty that she deserved to be happy. The future, golden like the ruby of her ring, stretched before her, full of possibilities. Transcend. Chapter 10. Preparations and Revelations. The months of wedding preparation brought joyful bustle to San Sebastian plantation. Rosa found herself at the center of a whirlwind of activities she had never imagined possible, choosing fabrics, dress fittings, planning the ceremony and celebration. Sinha Theodora took on the role of guide, teaching Rosa the social protocols a plantation lady should know. The lessons took place in the afternoons, in the mansion's visiting room, and Rosa absorbed every detail with the same thirst for knowledge she had shown with books. "A lady should first greet the eldest people," explained Theodora, while Rosa practiced elegant curtsies, "and always wait to be offered a seat before sitting." Rosa learned quickly, but sometimes felt like an actress playing a character. Would she be able to always live following so many social rules? Na Fortunata, in turn, took charge of the culinary preparations. The celebration would be smaller than traditional. Carlos respected the fact that many important families in the region probably wouldn't attend, but it would be abundant and delicious. "Child," said Fortunata while teaching Rosa to supervise the kitchen, "marriage is sacred union. Good food blesses the union." It was during these preparations that Rosa received an unexpected visit. It was a hot August afternoon when an elegant carriage stopped in front of the mansion. From it descended a lady of about 50, well-dressed, with aristocratic bearing but kind eyes. Carlos received the visit with surprise and joy. "Aunt Amelia, what a wonderful surprise!" Rosa watched from the sewing room window, where she was with Rita adjusting the final details of her wedding dress. The woman embraced Carlos with genuine affection, and the two conversed animatedly. Minutes later, Carlos appeared in the sewing room with a radiant smile. "Rosa, I want to introduce you to someone very special. My Aunt Amelia, my mother's sister, who came especially from São Paulo to meet you." Rosa felt her heart accelerate. This was the first real test of acceptance from Carlos's family. Donna Amelia was an imposing woman, but her eyes radiated human warmth. She studied Rosa carefully, then smiled. "So you're the Rosa about whom Carlos writes with such affection in his letters." "He writes about me." Rosa looked at Carlos, surprised. "Constantly," confirmed Donna Amelia. "He speaks of your intelligence, your kindness, how you transformed his life. I came to meet the woman who managed to return my nephew's smile." Rosa felt touched and nervous at the same time. "Donna Amelia, Dear, you may call me Aunt Amelia. After all, we'll soon be family." Aunt Amelia's immediate acceptance was like balm for Rosa. During the 3 days the lady remained at the plantation, they developed a genuine friendship. Amelia told family stories, showed portraits, spoke about Carlos's deceased wife with tenderness and without resentment. "Caterina was a good girl," she said in a private conversation with Rosa, "but you're very different. She was delicate like a porcelain doll. You have an inner strength that Carlos needs. He was always very sensitive, very emotional. He needs someone who compliments him, not someone who makes him even more fragile." "Do you really approve of our marriage?" asked Rosa directly. "Completely," responded Aunt Amelia without hesitation. "Rosa, I've seen Carlos these past 3 years visiting our family like a ghost of himself. Now I see him renewed with clear purposes, speaking of the future with enthusiasm. That's priceless." The night before departing, Aunt Amelia called Rosa for a private conversation in the garden. "Dear, I want to give you something," she said, taking from a small box a delicate pearl necklace. "These pearls belong to my mother, then to me. Now I want them to be yours." Rosa was too moved to speak. "Aunt Amelia, I can't accept something so valuable." "Yes, you can, because you're not just the wife Carlos chose. You're the daughter I never had. And a mother always leaves her best jewels to her daughter." When Aunt Amelia departed, Rosa felt more confident about her future. Having Carlos's family's blessing meant their marriage would have solid foundations. The last weeks of August passed like a dream. The dress was finished, a simple but elegant model of light blue silk. Rosa refused traditional white, saying blue was the color of hope. Rita had embroidered small flowers on the cuffs and hem, delicate work that transformed the piece into a work of art. Carlos also made his preparations. He completely renovated the rooms that would be the couple's, creating an environment that combined elegance with coziness. He bought new furniture, had fine linen curtains made, and installed a small bookshelf for the books Rosa was accumulating. "I want you to feel at home from the first day," he explained, showing her the final result. Rosa walked through what would be her married bedroom, delicately touching the new furniture, admiring details thought especially for her. There was a desk by the window, a comfortable armchair for reading, and on the wall a portrait of her that Carlos had secretly commissioned from a São Paulo artist. "Carlos, Everything is perfect, she whispered, moved. No, he corrected, approaching and embracing her. It will be perfect when you're here as my wife. On the wedding eve, Rosa had a sleepless night, not from nervousness, but from disbelief. The next day, she would be Rosa Barbosa de Almeida. She would have her own home, a husband who loved her, a future she had learned to paint with hopeful colors. Lying in her bed in the worker's house for the last time, she looked at the ring that in a few hours would be accompanied by the wedding band. She thought of her father, wishing he could see her at that moment. She even thought of Gertrude's, hoping that one day she might understand that her daughter hadn't risen in life out of self-interest, but for love. Rita snored softly in the next bed, a smile on her lips. Now Fortunata had spent the day cooking like a woman possessed. Signora Teodora had checked every detail of the ceremony multiple times. Everyone was happy for her. Everyone supported her. Rosa had never felt so loved, so accepted, so at home. The dawn of the most important day of her life was coming, and Rosa Santos was ready to become Rosa Barbosa de Almeida. Chapter 11. The Day of Love. September 15th, 1879. Dawned golden and perfumed. Autumn painted the trees with soft tones, and a delicate breeze carried the aroma of the garden's last flowers, mixed with the sweet perfume of ripe coffee. Rosa woke with the first rays of sun, but didn't get up immediately. Lying in her bed, she contemplated for the last time that simple little room that had been her first true home. In a few hours, she would sleep in the mansion as lady of the plantation. Rita was already awake, sitting on the bed's edge with a radiant smile. "Buongiorno, sposa bella," she exclaimed. "Today is il grande giorno." The morning was a whirlwind of activities. Na Fortunata appeared with a special breakfast tray, fresh fruits, warm bread, golden honey, and aromatic coffee. "Child, you need to eat well," insisted Fortunata. "Wedding day requires energy." Signora Teodora arrived soon after, with a team of women to help Rosa prepare. They had set up a true beauty atelier in the workers' house common room. The bath was a ceremony in itself. Water perfumed with rose essence, glycerin soap that Carlos had specially ordered, and linen towels that Rita had secretly embroidered in recent weeks. Then came the ritual of putting on the dress. The light blue silk slipped over Rosa's body like water, and the women sighed in admiration. Rita adjusted every detail, every fold, while Teodora took care of her hair. "You're beautiful, Rosa," murmured Candida, who had left her children with neighbors to help with preparations. Beautiful outside and in. Rosa looked at herself in the hand mirror Rita held and barely recognized the girl looking back. The dress enhanced her eyes, Aunt Amelia's pearl necklace gracefully adorned her neck, and hair arranged in an elegant but romantic style completed the transformation. "God," she whispered, "is that really me?" "It's you, yes," smiled Teodora. "You were always this beautiful. You just hadn't had the opportunity to see yourself." Noon. The hour had arrived. The plantation's small chapel was decorated with wildflowers that Rita and the other women had gathered at dawn. Coffee branches with ripe fruits adorned the altar, symbolizing prosperity and abundance. White candles created an atmosphere of intimacy and solemnity. The guests were few but dear. Aunt Amelia had returned especially for the ceremony, occupying a place of honor in the front row. Father Miguel waited at the altar, visibly moved. Some more liberal neighboring farmers attended, along with all the property's workers, clean and dressed up like never before. Rosa entered the chapel accompanied by Signora Teodora, who had requested the honor of walking her to the altar. Her steps were firm, her posture elegant, but her heart beat like a frightened little bird's. When she saw Carlos waiting at the altar, everything around seemed to disappear. He wore his best dark suit, hair carefully combed, but it was his gaze that struck her fully, a look of admiration, love, and gratitude that made her feel she was floating. "You look stunning," he murmured when she reached his side. "So do you," replied Rosa, and smiled with such happiness that some people in the audience were moved to tears. The ceremony was simple, but touching. Father Miguel spoke about love that overcomes barriers, about union built with mutual respect, about how two people can become a family and transform the world around them. "Carlos Barbosa de Almeida," asked the priest, "do you accept Rosa Santos as your legitimate wife? Do you promise to love her, respect her, and care for her in joys and sorrows, in health and sickness, in wealth and poverty, until death do you part?" "I do," replied Carlos with a clear, firm voice, his eyes fixed on Rosa. "Rosa Santos." Now it was her turn. "Do you accept Carlos Barbosa de Almeida as your legitimate husband? Do you promise to love him, respect him, and support him in joys and sorrows, in health and sickness, in wealth and poverty, until death do you part?" Rosa felt emotion close her throat. She looked at that man who had transformed her life, who had taught her to love and be loved, who had chosen to fight against all social conventions to stay by her side. "I do," she whispered, then repeated with more strength, "I do." The rings were exchanged, two simple gold bands that Carlos had commissioned with special inscriptions, "Forever" on hers, "With love" on his. "I pronounce you husband and wife," announced Father Miguel with a radiant smile. "What God has joined, let no man separate." Carlos kissed Rosa gently, a sweet and respectful kiss that sealed not just their legal union, but the commitment of two souls who recognized each other and chose to walk together. The church exploded in applause. Rita cried and shouted congratulations in Italian. Nha Fortunata wiped away tears of joy. Aunt Amelia smiled with pride. Even the most conservative farmers seemed touched by the sincerity of the moment. The celebration was held in the mansion's gardens, under centennial trees that witnessed the birth of another love in their welcoming shadows. Simple but abundant tables offered delicacies prepared by Fortunata: roast pig, milk sweets, corn cakes, seasonal fruits. Rosa circulated among guests as if she were dreaming. She received congratulations, embraces, blessings. She felt like a princess in her own fairy tale, but a real fairy tale, built with work, dignity, and true love. When night came and the last guests departed, Carlos took Rosa by the hand and led her to the mansion, to her home. "Welcome home, Mrs. Barbosa de Almeida," he said, symbolically carrying her across the threshold. Rosa laughed, feeling lighter than a feather. "Thank you for bringing me home, Mr. Barbosa de Almeida." And that night, in the rooms Carlos had prepared with such care, Rosa discovered that love could be even more beautiful and complete than she had imagined. Lying in her husband's arms, hearing his heart beat against her own, Rosa looked through the window at the stars and whispered a prayer of gratitude. She was a loved, respected, valued woman. She was a happy wife, and the best was yet to come. Chapter 12. Married Life. The first months of marriage passed like a golden dream. Rosa adapted to life in the mansion with a naturalness that surprised everyone, especially herself. Carlos had been insightful in creating an environment that blended elegance with simplicity, allowing Rosa to feel comfortable without being intimidated. Mornings began early, but no longer with the weight of cruel obligations. Rosa woke to the sound of birds and the aroma of coffee that Nha Fortunata prepared with special care for the new masters. Carlos had insisted Rosa didn't need to work physically, but she had negotiated to continue supervising some activities she loved, tending the gardens, helping with the improvised school they had created for the workers' children, and organizing the library, which had become her favorite refuge. It was on one of those December mornings, almost 3 months after the wedding, that Rosa felt the first nausea. She was organizing new books Carlos had ordered from São Paulo, when a wave of nausea hit her so strongly she had to lean against the bookshelf. Nha Fortunata, who entered at that moment with a morning snack tray, noticed immediately. "Child, you're pale," she observed, setting the tray on the table and approaching with concern. "It must be the heat," murmured Rosa, but Fortunata had eyes too experienced to be fooled. "How long have you been feeling this way?" Rosa thought. Actually, for several days she had noticed herself different, more sensitive to smells, more tired, with an unstable stomach. "A few days," she admitted. Fortunata smiled with an expression mixing joy and complicity. "Child, I think we have good news here." Rosa took a few seconds to understand, and when she did, felt her heart race. "Do you think I think you two will need to choose baby names," laughed Fortunata, embracing Rosa with maternal affection. That afternoon, when Carlos returned from the coffee groves, Rosa awaited him in the library with sweet anxiety. How to tell him the news? How to share with him a joy so great it barely fit in her chest? "Rosa!" Carlos noticed her agitation immediately. Did something happen? Rosa rose from the armchair where she was trying to read without managing to concentrate, approached her husband and took his hands in hers. "Carlos, I need to tell you something," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. He frowned, worried. "What is it?" I believe that—" Rosa breathed deeply and smiled. "I think we're going to have a baby." The silence that followed lasted only seconds but seemed eternal. Carlos looked at Rosa as if he needed to process the words. Then, slowly, a wonderful smile began forming on his face. A baby, he repeated, almost whispering. "The baby," confirmed Rosa, laughing through tears of joy. Carlos took her in his arms and spun her in the air, laughing like a child who had just received the best gift in the world. "Rosa, we're going to be parents!" he exclaimed, setting her down and kissing her with passion and tenderness. The news spread through the plantation like flower perfume. Na Fortunata took control of Rosa's nutrition, creating special dishes to nourish the future mother. Señora Teodora began organizing the baby's trousseau. Rita, always dramatic, declared she would be the best aunt in all Italy and Brazil. Carlos became even more attentive, if that was possible. He hired a doctor from the capital to follow Rosa's pregnancy, had the baby's room prepared next to their quarters, and spent hours reading about newborn care. "You're exaggerating," Rosa laughed when she saw him studying medical manuals with the same concentration he devoted to agriculture books. "I want to be prepared," he replied seriously. "This baby will have the best father I can be." The pregnancy progressed peacefully. Rosa had never felt so well cared for, so protected. Dr. Antonio visited her monthly and declared her an exemplary, expectant mother. "This child is growing in an environment of much love," he said. "That makes all the difference." It was true. Rosa spoke to the baby constantly, sang lullabies she remembered from her father, read stories aloud so the child would get accustomed to the sounds of the world awaiting them. Carlos also participated in these rituals. At night, he would rest his head on Rosa's belly and talk to the baby about the plantation, about plans he had for the future, about how loved and valued they would be. "What shall we name him?" he asked on one of those May nights, when Rosa's belly was already round and the baby moved constantly. "If it's a boy, Francisco," replied Rosa without hesitation. "Like my father." "Francisco Barbosa de Almeida," tested Carlos. "A strong, worthy name. And if it's a girl?" Rosa thought for a moment. "Esperanza," she said finally. "Because this baby is our hope for the future, proof that love can create beautiful things." Carlos kissed Rosa's forehead with infinite tenderness. Esperanza Barbosa de Almeida, also perfect. The birth happened on a July dawn in 1880, when winter painted the world with soft colors. Rosa woke with the first contractions and, with the calm that characterized her personality, gently woke Carlos. "Love, I think our baby is eager to arrive." The birth was attended by Dr. Antonio, helped by Na Fortunata and Señora Teodora. Carlos waited outside the room, pacing nervously through the house, until a strong, healthy cry announced the child's arrival. "It's a boy!" shouted Fortunata, appearing at the door with a radiant smile. "A beautiful, strong boy!" Carlos entered the room slowly, as if stepping on sacred ground. Rosa, though tired, smiled with deep peace. In her arms, she held a small but perfect baby, with dark hair like his father's, and eyes promising to be expressive like his mother's. "Francisco," whispered Rosa. "Our Francisco." Carlos approached the bed, extended a finger that the baby immediately grasped with his tiny hand. "Hello, my son," he murmured, his voice choked with emotion. "Welcome to the family." That night, Carlos wrote in his diary, "Today Francisco was born, my son, our son. Rosa gave me not just an heir, but a future full of meaning. I'm the happiest and most grateful man in the world." Rosa, with the baby sleeping in her arms, looked through the window at the stars and knew her life had found its true purpose. She was a mother, wife, and finally completely happy. Little Francisco would grow up loved, respected, and would carry with him the love story that had made his existence possible. Chapter 13. Transforming Revelations. The years following Francisco's birth were ones of growing prosperity and joy for the Barbosa de Almeida family. The plantation flourished as never before, not just economically, but socially. Rosa had implemented improvements that transformed São Sebastião into a model for other properties. The school operated regularly, the medical dispensary served the entire region, and working conditions were so fair that there was never a lack of hands willing to contribute to the plantation's progress. Francisco, now 4 years old, was a smart and curious child who moved between the mansion and the workers' quarters with the naturalness of one raised to see all people as equals. He spoke with equal ease to Na Fortunata in the kitchen and to Dr. Antonio during his medical visits. It was a golden April afternoon in 1884 when a letter arrived that would once again change the course of Rosa's story. Father Miguel brought it personally, his face bearing a complex expression of sadness and urgency. "Rosa, my daughter," he said, handing over the sealed envelope, A letter arrived from Anna. Rosa felt her heart accelerate. She hadn't received direct news from her sister. She knew through scattered comments from people in the region that Anna had married a merchant from Taubaté, but nothing beyond that. With trembling hands, she opened the letter and read, "Dear Rosa, I write to you. I don't know to turn. Our mother is very ill, perhaps dying, constantly asks for you. I know you two quarreled years ago. I know she treated you, but Rosa, she's repentant. She speaks your name in fever's delirium, cries for you. I myself never understood why Mama treated you so differently. Only now, with her ill and delirious, am I discovering truths that might explain many things. Please, Rosa, come. If not for her, for me, who am your sister, and need you in this difficult moment. With love and longing, Anna." Rosa finished reading with tears in her eyes. Carlos, who had approached upon noticing her agitation, read the letter over her shoulder. "What do you want to do?" he asked gently. Rosa looked at Francisco, playing in the garden with his wooden horses, then at the house that had become her home, finally at the husband who supported her unconditionally. "I need to go," she said firmly. "I need to see Gertrude's one last time. Then we'll go together," decided Carlos. "You, me, and Francisco. As a family." The journey to the Santos family house took half a day. Rosa felt her heart tighten as they approached the house where she had suffered so much. Everything seemed smaller, more deteriorated than in her memories. Anna waited at the door, and Rosa was shocked by her sister's transformation. At 24, Anna looked like a 40-year-old woman, too thin, with sunken eyes and deep sadness stamped on her face. "Rosa!" Anna ran to embrace her, and Rosa felt her sister trembling. "Thank you for coming. Thank you." They entered the house that smelled of medicinal herbs and illness. Gertrude's was in the back room, on an improvised bed, visibly weakened, but conscious. When she saw Rosa, her eyes filled with tears. "Rosa, my daughter, you came." Rosa approached the bed, held her mother's bony hand. All the anger, all the resentment she had carried for years seemed to disappear before that fragile, repentant woman. "I'm here, Mother," she said softly. I need to tell you the truth," murmured Gertrude's, with a weak voice. "The truth about why I treated you so badly." Rosa frowned. "Mother, that's not important now." "Yes, it is," insisted Gertrude's, trying to sit up slightly. "Anna, get the box from under the bed." "The wooden box." Anna obeyed, bringing a small dusty box. Gertrude opened it with trembling hands and removed some yellowed letters and a photograph. "Rosa, you're not Francisco's daughter," said Gertrude, the words coming out like a painful confession. The world seemed to stop. Rosa felt Carlos move behind her, supporting her. "What are you saying?" whispered Rosa. "You're the daughter of João Carlos de Mendonça, son of Baron de Mendonça. He seduced me when I was young, promised marriage, then abandoned me when he learned I was expecting you." Rosa looked at the photograph Gertrude extended to her. It was an elegant man with aristocratic features, and Rosa could see undeniable similarities to her own appearance. "Did Francisco know?" she asked with an emotional voice. "He knew and didn't care. He married me anyway, raised you as his legitimate daughter, loved you more than I deserved him to love, and I hated you because you constantly reminded me of my dishonor, my shame." The revelations fell on Rosa like an avalanche. Anna cried silently. Carlos had approached and placed his hand on her shoulder. "Mother," said Rosa with a controlled voice, "Francisco was my father, the man who raised me, who loved me, who taught me to read. That other one, he's just the man who fathered me." "Rosa, you need to know," continued Gertrude. "You have rights. João Carlos died last year, left a fortune. You're his daughter. You have the right to inheritance." Rosa looked at the letters, the photograph, the mother who finally revealed secrets kept for decades. "I don't want anything that comes from him," she declared firmly. "I have a family, a home, a name I'm proud of. I'm Rosa Barbosa de Almeida, wife of Carlos, mother of Francisco, daughter of Francisco Santos, the only father I recognize." Gertrude smiled through tears. "You became a magnificent woman, Rosa. Better than I ever was, better than I deserve." "You're my mother," said Rosa, kissing Gertrude's fevered forehead. "And I forgive everything. I forgive not because you deserve it, but because I deserve peace." Gertrude closed her eyes, an expression of relief finally relaxing her suffering face. "Thank you, my daughter. Thank you for being better than your mother." Rosa spent 3 days caring for Gertrude, dividing time between the sick mother and long conversations with Anna, who revealed her own difficulties in marriage. "Come live with us," offered Rosa to her sister. "At the plantation there's room for you, dignified work, respect." Anna accepted the offer with gratitude and relief. When they returned to Saint Sebastian plantation, Rosa carried with her not just Anna and her few possessions, but a new understanding of her own history. The revelations about her biological paternity hadn't changed her essence, but explained certain characteristics. The ease of learning, taste for books, naturally elegant posture. That night, lying in Carlos's arms, Rosa reflected on destiny's strange paths. "Do you mind?" she asked. "The fact that I have noble blood?" Carlos laughed softly. "Rosa, my love, you always had nobility. Not in blood, but in soul. That's what makes you special." Rosa smiled in the darkness. He was right. Her true nobility came from her choices, her capacity to love, to forgive, to build life where there had only been suffering. The future continued golden before her, now enriched by Anna's presence and the certainty that the past, however painful, had finally found peace. Tertuihu, Chapter 14. The Legacy of Love. 10 years had passed since the revelations about Rosa's paternity, and São Sebastião plantation had become legendary throughout the region. What Carlos and Rosa built together surpassed any expectation. A prosperous property, yes, but mainly a model of how human relationships based on respect and dignity could transform lives. Francisco, now 14 years old, had grown as a young man conscious of his privileges, but also of his responsibilities. He studied in São Paulo during the week and returned on weekends, always eager to help with plantation projects. Rosa had insisted he know not just property administration, but also manual labor, so he would never forget that prosperity is built with sweat and dedication. Anna had completely transformed since arriving at the plantation. The sad, dejected woman had blossomed into a competent educator, responsible for the school that now served more than 50 children from the region. She had married 2 years earlier to Dr. Antonio, the doctor who had accompanied the family for years and lived a quiet happiness she had never experienced before. Na Fortunata, at 74 years old, continued reigning in the kitchen, though now with assistants who had learned all her culinary secrets. She was Francisco's grandmother of the heart, and Rosa's confidant in all important moments. On a September afternoon in 1894, when Rosa completed 15 years of marriage, Carlos arrived from town with a proposal that would make her take one of the most important decisions of her life. "Rosa," he said, finding her in the library where she was reviewing school records, "the provincial government wants to formalize our project." Rosa raised her eyes from the papers, curious. "Formalize how?" "They want to transform our school into an official model for rural education, and they want you to direct a regional education program for workers' children." Rosa felt her heart accelerate. The proposal was tempting, but also frightening. Would that mean traveling much, being away from family? "It would mean expanding to the entire province what you managed to do here," explained Carlos, sitting beside her. "Rosa, you have in your hands the chance to change the lives of hundreds, maybe thousands of children." Rosa walked to the window, looking at the gardens where she had learned to read with Carlos, where she had discovered it was possible to be loved. She thought of all the children who could have opportunities like she had, all the families who could benefit from education. "And you? What do you think?" "I think," said Carlos, approaching and embracing her from behind, "you were born for this. I think this is the realization of a greater purpose. But the plantation will continue prospering. Anna can fully take over the school here. Francisco is almost ready to help with general administration. Rosa, the time has come to fly higher." That night, during family dinner, Rosa shared the proposal. The reaction was unanimously enthusiastic. "Mama, you have to accept," declared Francisco with his 14-year-old conviction. "Imagine how many people can have a better life because of your work." "It's a unique opportunity," agreed Anna, "and you know you have all our support." Rosa looked around the table. Her husband, son, sister, Na Fortunata, Sina Teodora, now retired but still living on the plantation as a family member. All these people she loved, who supported her unconditionally. "Then it's decided," she announced. "I accept the proposal." The following months were of intense preparation. Rosa traveled to São Paulo several times, met educational authorities, studied modern pedagogical methods, planned a comprehensive program that included not just basic education, but also professional training for youth and adults. The program was officially launched in January 1895, with Rosa as Regional Director of Rural Education. She was the first woman to occupy such a position in the province, and her appointment generated controversy in some conservative circles. But results quickly silenced critics. In 2 years, Rosa had founded 15 rural schools, trained 40 teachers, and implemented adult literacy programs that reached more than 1,000 people. Her work drew attention even from the federal capital, and she was invited to present her method at national conferences. But what most filled Rosa with pride wasn't the honors or official recognition. It was receiving letters from mothers who could now help their children with homework, from young people who had gotten better jobs thanks to education received, from entire families who had changed their lives through knowledge. In one such letter, a woman wrote, "Mrs. Rosa, you taught me that women like us can dream. My daughter today studies to be a teacher. This wouldn't be possible without the school you brought to our city. Thank you for showing that love can transform the world." It was 1898, a golden autumn afternoon, when Rosa returned from a particularly long trip through the interior. She had just inaugurated 2 new schools and was tired but happy. Carlos waited for her at the station, as he always did, and his embrace was the best remedy for all the journey's fatigues. "How was it?" he asked, helping her down from the carriage. "Wonderful," smiled Rosa. "You should have seen the children's eyes when they opened books for the first time. It's magical." They returned home in comfortable silence. Francisco, now 18 and studying law in Sao Paulo, had returned that weekend. Ana and Dr. Antonio would dine with them, as was tradition on Friday nights. Na Fortunata had prepared all of Rosa's favorite dishes. During dinner, Rosa looked at each face around the table and felt deep gratitude. She had traveled an impossible journey, from mistreated maid to one of the province's most influential women. But more important than that, she had built a family based on love, created projects that would perpetuate that love far beyond her own life. "Rosa," said Carlos, raising his wineglass, 20 years ago you arrived at this plantation as a frightened washerwoman. Today you're a beloved wife, dedicated mother, respected educator. But to me you remain the same extraordinary woman I fell in love with by the stream. For us too," added Francisco, raising his glass. "Mama, you taught us that dignity doesn't come from where we're born, but from how we choose to live." Rosa felt tears of joy burn her eyes. She raised her own glass. "Thank you," she said with an emotional voice, "for teaching me that true love builds bridges where others see only chasms, for showing me that a life is worthwhile when lived in service to others." That night, lying in Carlos's arms, Rosa contemplated the stars through the window. In a few months, she would turn 40. She didn't know how many years still lay ahead, but she knew each day had been lived with purpose. "Carlos," she whispered in the darkness, "if you could go back in time, would you change anything about our story?" "Nothing," he replied without hesitation. "Every difficulty, every tear, every moment of uncertainty brought us here, and here is exactly where I want to be." Rosa smiled and closed her eyes. Tomorrow there would be new schools to found, new lives to touch, new dreams to make reality. But this night was for gratitude, for love, for the certainty that she had chosen to be stronger than her pain and more hopeful than her circumstances. The night wind whispered among the trees of São Sebastião plantation, carrying with it the promises of all future mornings. Rosa Santos Barbosa de Almeida fell asleep, knowing she had transformed not just her own life, but left seeds of transformation that would bloom for generations. The woman who had once awakened before roosters crowed to serve others' cruelty now slept like a queen in her own kingdom, a kingdom built not with wealth or power, but with love, dignity, and hope. Her story would continue echoing through the years, inspiring other women to believe that no matter how dark the night, dawn always comes for those who have courage to wait and strength to fight. End of narrative.